Carl Jung once said something that would change how you understand yourself forever. He claimed that everything bothering us in others could be the key to understanding ourselves. But what he never explained was this: how do you turn that understanding into a powerful transformation tool? Keep watching this video, because what I'm about to tell you about the psychology of silence will change your approach to disrespect forever. When someone disrespects you, your first instinct pushes you toward confrontation. You want them to understand. You want to teach them a lesson, maybe. But according to Carl Jung's groundbreaking work on human psychology, the most powerful move isn't what you say, it's what you strategically remove from your life. This is what you need to understand. When you cut off their access to your time, your energy and your presence, you're not just sending a message. You're activating what Jung called the shadow, that hidden part of their personality they've been avoiding all along. People who disrespect you operate from a place of psychological comfort. They assume your kindness will keep you around them. They expect you to keep tolerating their behavior. Jung describes this as projection. They project their own insecurities onto you, and they expect you to carry the emotional burden of their dysfunction. But here's where it gets interesting, and you need to pay close attention to every word I'm about to say, because this is the turning point. When you stop answering their calls, when you stop replying to their messages, and when you stop being in the places where you used to be, you trigger what Jung called active imagination in their mind. Suddenly they start trying to understand what went wrong, as if they're talking to empty air. This confusion isn't random. It's their soul beginning to face that shadow they've been running from. Jung discovered something profound about human nature. He realized that when two personalities meet, it's like two chemical substances making contact. If there's a reaction, both transform. But what happens when one substance suddenly disappears? A unique form of psychological discomfort emerges, the distressing experience that comes from being left without explanation. Jung called this process individuation. It's the journey where a person is forced to face their true self without external distractions. Your absence becomes a mirror, and without the distraction of your emotional reaction, it reflects back only their own behavior. This is extremely important. This mirroring process is far more effective than any argument you could ever have. Why? Because it forces them to confront themselves. Jung understood that real change doesn't come through external pressure. It only happens when a person confronts themselves. According to Jung's research on psychological dynamics, cutting off contact isn't passive. Doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've made a conscious decision to avoid pointless conflict. It means you've realized that your time and energy are too valuable to waste on someone who doesn't recognize your worth. Jung said it this way: the greatest privilege in life is finding out who you really are. When you choose to protect yourself instead of punishing them, you enter a sacred process of existence, and that's the psychological turning point that changes everything. The more you focus on your own psychological development, what Jung called inner work, the more powerful you become in their eyes. At first they might think you're just being distant. They might assume you'll come back the way you always have. But as Jung discovered in his clinical practice, the human soul cannot indefinitely ignore someone's absence. When days turn into weeks and your silence becomes heavier, they notice that you're shining, that your focus has changed, and that your energy no longer revolves around them. That's when what Jung called the transcendent function activates. It's the moment they realize they didn't lose access to you because you made a scene. They lost it because you made a psychological decision. Jung had an observation about human nature that will shake you. The most terrible thing, he said, is accepting yourself completely. But what's even more frightening for those who disrespect you is seeing that you've completely accepted yourself while they remain trapped in their own psychological patterns. There's incredible power in silent transformation. when you start leveling up without making noise about it. Jung's principles of psychological transformation show us you're actually changing the energy around you, while others wait for a reaction, wondering if you'll break or explode. You're quietly and steadily building yourself behind the scenes, and nothing, absolutely nothing, creates more regret in someone who disrespected you than realizing they underestimated your capacity for self-actualization. They watch your rise from a distance, and that's when what Jung calls their involuntary shadow work begins. Jung discovered that the human mind desires predictability and patterns. But true psychological power comes from what he called controlled chaos. Your ability to remain unpredictable while preserving your inner harmony. You can't measure their movements, and this mystery becomes psychologically intimidating. Here's the mistake many people make. They believe they need to announce their growth. They think success is only real when it's shared, talked about, or proven. But Jung understood something critical. Real psychological growth doesn't need approval. It requires no attention. It happens only through what he called active imagination and inner work. When you start developing mentally, emotionally, financially, or spiritually without making noise, you gain what Jung defined as psychological advantage. You become unpredictable. They can't evaluate your movements, and this mystery becomes psychologically disturbing. While they remain stuck in what Jung called unconscious patterns, cycles of gossip, doubt, and manipulation, you quietly shift gears. You invest in yourself. You read more. You behave differently. You choose your peace over trivial conversations. This is the point where Carl Jung's psychology becomes absolutely fascinating. And this is why you need to completely understand what comes next. Suddenly, you stop responding the way you used to. You don't explain yourself. You don't participate in every discussion you're invited to. And it's this that makes people see you differently, not your words, your evolution. According to Jung, this evolution triggers what he called anima-animus projection. They start seeing qualities in you they never noticed before. The beauty of this is that you don't have to get revenge. Your psychological development becomes the message. It quietly tells them, you never hurt me. You just reminded me of who I am. Every silent step you take toward your goal, every objective you reach without their knowledge, every internal battle you win, becomes part of what Jung called the hero's journey. That unexpected process. They thought you'd stay stuck. They assumed you'd need their approval. They believed their disrespect would define you. But your silence proved what Jung always defended. The soul possesses an incredible capacity for self-healing and transformation when the right conditions exist. Jung said once, "I am not what happened to me. I am who I choose to become." Staying calm in the face of disrespect is one of the most powerful psychological choices you can make. This isn't weakness. This is what Jung called conscious control. When someone disrespects you, they generally expect an emotional reaction. According to Jung's research on psychological triggers, they want you to get angry, raise your voice, and lash back. They expect you to lose your composure, because that gives them psychological power. But when you stay calm, when you choose silence over shouting, when you choose peace over chaos, you completely transform what Jung called the power dynamic. You deny them the satisfaction of seeing you fall apart. And here's the psychological brilliance of this approach. Calmness isn't about suppressing your emotions. According to Jung, it's about mastering them through what he called conscious integration, controlling your reactions instead of being controlled by them. One of Jung's deepest discoveries involved psychological boundaries. Knowing your own darkness, he said, is the best way to deal with the darkness of others. But what Jung discovered later will forever change how you establish boundaries. The strongest form of self-respect is setting boundaries without explanation. When someone disrespects you, you might initially want to explain why their behavior hurt you. But true psychological power lies in what Jung called sovereign will, silently protecting your boundaries without pleading for understanding. There's no need to slam doors or raise your voice. All you need is what Jung described as a quiet shift in consciousness. You stop responding to messages that drain you. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop supporting people who only contact you when they need something. At first, they might not even realize what's happening, but gradually the access they once had begins to disappear. This doesn't stem from revenge. It comes from what Jung called psychological self-protection. Here's what most people completely overlook about human nature. Everything that bothers us in others can help us understand ourselves. But Jung also discovered something else. Choosing not to seek revenge creates a specific psychological peace. Not because you're weak, but because you understand something deeper. Life has the ability to handle psychological scores far better than you ever could. Jung called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that appear when you align with your true self instead of reacting from your wounded ego. Revenge usually binds you psychologically to the person who wronged you. It drains your energy, clouds your vision, and leaves your emotions trapped in what Jung called the backward-looking shadow. But when you release the urge to retaliate and instead invest that energy in becoming a better version of yourself, you break the psychological cycle. Sometimes the most powerful psychological move you can make is simply to vanish. Not from weakness or defeat, but from what Carl Jung called conscious choice and self-respect. When someone repeatedly disrespects you, they expect you to stay. They expect constant access, expect you to keep accepting their behavior, but when you quietly withdraw, when you remove yourself from that environment without warning, your absence transforms into what Jung described as a louder psychological message than your presence. And in that silence, they begin to feel a loss they didn't think was possible. Disappearing with dignity isn't about ignoring someone or dismissing them. According to Jung's research on psychological health, it's about reclaiming your energy. It means you've reached a point where you understand that proving anything to people who can't see your worth no longer makes sense. You stop getting into meaningless arguments. You stop waiting for apologies. You stop trying to fix something you didn't break. Instead, you leave with what we might call individuated grace. No drama, no final words, no explanations, just a quiet, dignified absence. This kind of disappearing is psychologically unsettling to others. Why? Because it leaves them alone with their actions, without the distraction that your emotional response would have provided. Jung discovered that these forced moments of self-confrontation are among the most powerful catalysts for psychological change. They start to understand that your presence was never guaranteed. It was a gift. And they lost that gift through their own unconscious behavior. Time passes. They might try reaching out to you. They might wonder why you pulled away. But by then, you'll have become someone who embodies what Jung called psychological sovereignty. Someone who no longer needs closure from the people who caused the harm. Your disappearance wasn't punishment. It was self-protection. As Carl Jung always stressed, the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. When you move away from things that consume you, you create space for things that elevate you. The people who once disrespected you will watch from far away as you grow without them. This awareness creates a more powerful impact than any argument, any reaction, or any dramatic confrontation possibly could, because long after you're gone, they'll feel it in the silence, in that emptiness you once filled. and in the dignity you carried as you walked away. And in that void, remorse will settle quietly, exactly as Jung predicted it would. So remember this the next time someone makes the mistake of overlooking you, disrespecting your loyalty, or underestimating your kindness. Remember what Carl Jung taught us about the power of psychological transformation. Don't explain yourself. Don't fight for their attention. Just go, and do it with such calmness, such grace, that they never forget the person they lost in your silence. Because in your silence, they will hear everything they need to know about who they chose to lose. If this video reminded you that there's a deeper power beyond how you respond to disrespect, if it helped you feel that silence can sometimes be the loudest answer, then I have one small request for you. In the comment section below, instead of wasting your energy on meaningless arguments, share this short but powerful statement with me. Write, "My silence is my strongest statement." Through this comment, share with us your intention to protect your own value and your peace instead of engaging with the noise outside. Acknowledge that the greatest transformation begins in silence. Yeah,